Ladies and gentlemen, capital G here alongside the Wanderer to present some awesome Kamigawa Neon Dynasty cards for our Commander decks. I'm going to be touching on about 60 cards today. It's a pretty packed set, very meaty, pairs nicely with a collapse solve, so grab a drink, relax, and let's hang out and look at some cardboard, shall we? Before we do, of course, if you like and enjoy what we're doing here on the channel, then like and subscribe. And help me get to some of those magic numbers, please, and thank you. Also, come join the Dungeons and Cardboard Discord group. Free to join, free to play. It's our LGS away from our LGS. Hang out with all sorts of cool people, play some EDH, Flesh and Blood, and tons of other cool games. And it's just a cool hangout in general. Lots of great people. Including Bulldog, of course, who's done some streaming and also uploaded some of his gameplay to YouTube. I've not featured recently. I've not had a chance to join him. But some of his more recent gameplay videos are quite entertaining and quite educational, in fact, so be sure to check that out. Also give him the subs. He would love to have that. So, with all of that set aside, we will make that disappear. And there's Okagachi just kind of hanging out and hiding behind there. Wanderer is going to go to wherever the Wanderer goes. And we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about a bunch of cards that fit in the 99 of all levels of rarity. Common, uncommon, rare, mythic. Some are the obvious ones that have already been hyped up. Others are a little more subtle, shall we say. And once we get through that, the second section will be legendary creatures. I want to touch on 10 of them, which I think will be really relevant. Again, not always all the obvious ones. Like, I'm not going to be talking about Jin-Gitaxias because, well, we don't have to. We're already complete without it. And then, of course, a few cards from the that have been spoiled so far from the Commander. Not as much the Commander decks themselves. I don't think the deck lists have been posted yet as of recording of this video, but some of the Commander exclusive cards that we'll find in set boosters. We'll touch on that today as well. So let's dive in, starting with the Network Terminal. It's a 3-mana rock, taps for a mana of any color. And the reason I highlight this one, it's not necessarily where we want to be, but it is nice to have something that can both ramp and also provide us a means to discard and draw cards. So it's just one, tap this, and another untapped artifact we control, such as, most pieces of equipment don't do anything tapped or untapped. So we can tap our Skull Clamp, we can tap our Ashnod's Altar, and filter through some cards with this. So I thought it's a nice little back pocket card. Some great utility there. And we're going in order by card type, by the way. So just starting with non-creature artifacts, and then moving on through to creatures, enchantments, instants, lands, sorceries. Just the order that the program lists it. So Dragonspark Reactor is up next. Red and a 1, really janky card, but I thought this was a pretty cool uncommon to highlight. And whenever this or another artifact enters the battlefield under our control, we get to put a charge counter on it. And then we can pay 4 and sacrifice it to deal damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to target player. And that much damage to up to 1 target creature. So we got ourselves a little bit of a mine that we can just kind of power up, and if it's not removed, we could take somebody out with it, like land the finishing blow out of nowhere with it, or perhaps draw some removal. Some of our other we'll have tons of other cool artifacts, but this might draw the hate away from that. So that's why I chose to highlight it. One that people are legit excited for: Mech Titan Core. It's a vehicle. We got tons of new vehicles in this set, which I'm excited to see. 2 generic gives us a 2/4 vehicle. It's only a creature if it's crewed. Only need to tap 2 power or more worth of creatures to crew it. But what's really cool here, of course, is pay 5. We exile this and up to 4 other artifact creatures or vehicles. So if you're playing a ton of artifact creatures, put it in there. And it can be vehicles. It can be non-creature vehicles as well. And we create a Mech Titan at 10/10 with Flying, Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, and Haste that is all colors. If that token ever leaves the battlefield, we don't get the Mech Titan core back, but we get everything else. So it's a good way to protect your board also from, say someone throws down a Shatterstorm and you just happen to have the mana to respond to it. Well, boom. Kind of, you can protect a portion of your board that way. Moving on to the Mirror Box. Now this is an interesting puzzle piece, shall we say. So the original Mirror Gallery was a 5 mana artifact that says the legend rule doesn't apply. Dot. So Mirror Box is already much more efficient at 3 mana in this regard. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control, so you can make as many copies of your legends as you want. You throw this out, you can write a replication in your Coma, for example, and have a ton of Comas. Of course, make sure nobody destroys the box. But I think where this is most useful will be in, say, Shadowborn Apostle decks or Persistent Pernicitor's deck, where you can have any number of the same creature in your deck. Reason for that is all of a sudden your Shadowborn Apostles, it's 1 mana for a 4/4, then a 5/5, then a 6/6, and it just keeps growing from there. You don't even need to go get your demon. Just swing with an army of Shadowborn Apostle, and they will be humongous. So I thought this was a fun card. It's, like I said, it's good for copying legendary creatures, and it's good for the decks where you can have creatures of the same name in your deck. Moonstare Prototype. This is a little interesting utility piece, shall we say. A 1 blue for this common artifact. Tap it and an untapped artifact or creature you control to add a generic mana. That's fantastic. That is a great ramp piece. Tap an artifact or a creature to get that generic mana. But of course, later in the game, if you don't need the mana anymore, you can always channel it, discard it. It's a blue and a 4, and discard the card. And I love the channel cards here in this set. This one is kind of cool. Discard the Moonstare Prototype. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it on the top or bottom of their library. So you choose the permanent, and of course the permanent's owner chooses where the card goes. But still, it's a nice little ability that can take something off the table at a key moment. Oni Cult Anvil, red and black for this artifact. It says here that whenever 1 or more artifacts you control leave the battlefield during your turn, you get a 1/1 colorless construct. This only triggers once each turn, so hey, that's fine. Sacrifice a servo, get a servo. Or in this case, a construct. But yes, it's sack 1, get 1. It also has the ability to tap, sack an artifact, deal 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain life. So it can give you a little bit of offense as well. So I thought this was a nice little sack outlet. Reckoner Bankbuster. This is actually a really good card, I think. 2 generic for a vehicle. When it's a creature, it's a 4/4, and it takes 3 power worth of creatures to crew it. But it does come into play with 3 charge counters on it, and you can pay 2 and tap this and remove a counter from the Reckoner to draw a card. Once there are no charge counters, you get a treasure token and a 1/1 colorless pilot that can crew vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. So a 1/1 that can crew vehicles as if it were 3 power, which is, exactly what it's looking for. So I think this is a really good card because it's a colorless way to draw extra cards, and it gives you a good board presence. Search Hacker Mech. If you are going into the vehicles deck, this is a great removal piece, actually. 4 mana gives you a vehicle that, when it's a creature, it's 5/5 with menace. And on ETB, deal damage equal to twice the number of vehicles you control to a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Pretty sweet. It's a good colorless piece of removal. So if someone's got their sword up, but you've got a bunch of vehicles, bam. Moving on to creatures, I got 14 creatures to talk about, starting with the Enthusiastic Mechnot. It's just another one of these creatures that can reduce the cost of your artifact spells. This will definitely see play in any decks that run these colors and run a bunch of artifacts. Gravelighter. I figured this was an interesting variant on the Plate Crafter mechanic, shall we say. black and 2 for this 2/2 flying spirit. When this enters a battlefield, if a creature died this turn, you get to draw a card. Otherwise, each player sacrifices a creature. So, if nothing's died yet, you play this, everybody sacks a creature. You play this, something has already died, you get a new card. Very effective both ways. The Chukai Naturalist. Similar to the Enthusiastic Mechanaut that we've seen earlier, white and green for this 2/2 enchantment creature. It has lifelink, and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less. Amazing. Enchantress doesn't really get this kind of support so often, so the fact that this is A, already an enchantment as is, and B, reduces your further spells and later spells by 1. That's gonna go into like every deck that plays these colors that want enchantments. Kami of Transience. So of course the sagas are back, and sagas eventually put themselves into the graveyard. So why not have this 2 mana 2/2 with trample? Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, it gets a +1/+1 counter, so it just gets bigger. But again, it has trample, so it's going to steamroll our opponent's creatures. And then at the beginning of each end step, if an enchantment was put into your graveyard from the battlefield this turn, you may return this from the graveyard to your hand, so it recurs itself. That is amazing. The fact that if somebody deals with it, it can come back. And it's so cheap to cast that you can replay this and continue developing your board. Loving our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, because that's straight up a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. It even looks as ugly as the most recent cinematic movie, because those turtles looked ugly. But moving on from that, green and 1 for this 1/3 Turtle Ninja with Ninjutsu. Good to see Ninjutsu back. It enters the battlefield with a Death Touch counter on it. So, a couple ways you can play this. Of course, you could just treat it as a Death Touch creature, or you can Ninjutsu it in, usually after blockers are declared. And then when this deals combat damage to player, you can actually remove the Death Touch counter to exile an artifact or enchantment that player controls. And here's a fun use for it. If you happen to be running, say, a Proliferate deck of some sort, you cast it as normal. It has its Death Touch counter. Almost spelled the wine. Because that's how exciting this is. Proliferate the Death Touch counters. So you swing in, and if you're either trading up, taking down a bigger creature, or you're exiling artifacts and enchantments. So I think that's a good way to play that as well. Lion Sash. So white and 1 for this 1/1 Equipment Cat. So one of the new mechanics, of course, in Kamigawa is Reconfigure, where we have creatures that basically act like equipment. So that is absolutely fantastic. In this case, we can pay 2 generic to turn this into a non-creature equipment and put it onto one of our other creatures. The cool thing that sells this, of course, is the fact that you can pay a white mana, exile target card from a graveyard. So just activated ability, hose graveyards, which is super important in our format. If the card you exile is a permanent card, this gets a +1/+1 counter. So even like fetch lands, just exile some of its fetch lands and get +1/+1 counters. Exile your own fetch lands if you're done with them. So not only does this become a big creature, but if you reconfigure it onto another creature, whatever creature you equip this to will have +1/+1 for each of the +1/+1 counters on Lion Sash. Fantastic. And of course, if somebody board wipes and Lion Sash is equipping a creature, someone casts a creature board wipe, well, guess what? Lion Sash then becomes unattached. It becomes a creature again, and it survives the board wipe. So you get to crack back. That's the cool thing about Reconfigure, is if somebody wipes your board, you get to crack back right away, regardless of color, as long as the creature that was equipping it dies. Another example of this are the Lizard Blades. Red and 1 for this 1/1 Equipment Lizard. Has double strike. Or you can equip it to a creature to give it double strike, and it's actually cheap to equip. Only 2 mana to equip it. So, fantastic creature here as well. Mirror Shell Crab. keep an eye on this one. This is huge, actually. Yes, we're looking at a 7 mana 5/7 with Ward 3. Read that channel ability and read it carefully. Blue 2, discard the crab. Counter target spell or ability unless its controller pays 3. Somebody taps out for Ugin. Minus is to wipe out your board. Mirror Shell Crab can counter it. You are not playing this as a creature except out of desperation or perhaps if you recur it somehow. This is a way to counter a spell or ability. Mana Leak a spell or ability. And it in and of itself is an activated ability, so it is very difficult to interact with. Most people aren't running things like Stifle or Disallow. So this is going to be really, really difficult. A counter that's really difficult to stop unless your opponent keeps mana open for it. So watch this common put in some work over the coming months. This even counters Ninjutsu, by the way. So that's another thing too. It can counter Ninjutsu. Scrap Welder. Lots of hype around this one, and for good reason. Red and 2 for this 3/3 Goblin Artificer. That's actually pretty big for a Goblin. Tap. Sack an artifact with mana value X. Return target artifact card with mana value less than X from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Sure thing. I mean, sack a big artifact for something a little cheaper. That's okay. It's still quite the value generator. Now, we've already talked about our Ninja Turtle, so there is Master Splinter. Silver Fur Master. Black and blue for this 2/2 Rat Ninja with Ninjutsu of black and blue. Ninjutsu abilities, you activate cost 1 less to activate. I believe that includes Yuriko. So if you're already running a Yuriko deck, this does synergize. Also, other ninja and rogue creatures you control get +1/+1, so it's a lord for 2 different tribes. So that is actually a nice fit for a lot of decks. Spirited Companion. This is a really, really good common for white. Man, it's just a common 1/1 dog. Yes, that's true. 2 mana, 1/1 dog. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. There are decks that care about dogs, such as Rin and Siri. And we're going to see more dog tribal stuff in the future, for certain. 2, it's an enchantment creature. If you're playing an Enchantress deck of any sort, you're not just drawing 1 card. You're drawing 2, 3, 4 cards for 2 mana. Easy. And yeah, what else is there to say? 2 mana for that. And we already play Elvish Visionary. Elvish Visionary is already a card that a lot of decks play. And that's just 2 mana, draw a card. Regular old elf creature. So, Spirited Companion is, I guess, vulnerable to some enchantment sweepers, but we don't see a lot of those in our format, at least not yet. So, yes. This card is amazing. This is going to be it's a common, but this is definitely staple territory stuff. Springleaf Avenger. I don't know if this will be as much of a staple, but this is a cool card. This Insect Ninja. So if you recast it, double green and 3. If you ninjutsu it, green and 3. Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. And it's a 6/5. So you ninjutsu this thing in, you're smacking your opponent for at least 6. And you're getting a permanent back from your graveyard. Could be a fetch land. Could be a creature that died earlier in the game. Doesn't matter what it is you're getting back. You're getting value and you're getting a beater. I like it. Unforgiving One. I like this name. Black and 2 for this 2/3 spirit with Menace. And look at the art on that. The art in the set is amazing, by the way. I'm sure we all know this. We all knew this was going to be the case. But whenever Unforgiving One attacks, return target creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of modified creatures you control. So you're running some equipment, you're running some counter synergies, auras. Well, you get to start bringing some creatures back just by turning sideways. And being Menace, it's a little harder to block. Someone will probably throw their 2 creatures in front of it because they don't want you to recur everything in your yard. But if you play it smart, you're going to get a bunch of value from this. And the last one I'm going to highlight, and this is definitely a big card for us, is Weaver of Harmony. Green and 1 for this 2/2 Snake Druid. Other enchantment creatures you control get +1/+1. Sweet, we have lots of enchantment creatures. We're seeing more and more of them as time goes by. Green, tap, copy target activated or triggered ability you control from an enchantment source. You may choose new targets for the copy. We cannot target mana abilities with this, that's fine. But hey, every time one of our sagas gets a lore counter, that's a triggered ability. So that's kind of why this card made it into the set, but we have lots and lots of cool abilities to copy. So it's an Anthem effect for our enchantment creatures, gives us additional triggers. I will gladly take that. On the topic of enchantments, and this is where we get to go into a deep dive on sagas and the pros and cons of them. All the new sagas in this set will have their 3 chapters, but once you hit chapter 3, you actually exile the saga and it comes back as a creature. So let's look at chapter 1 and 2 for Fable of the Mirror Breaker, a tribute to Kikijiki. Chapter 1, we get a 2/2 Shaman. Whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure token. That's actually really cool. 3 mana for a 2/2 of that ability. I like it. Chapter 2, you may discard up to 2 cards. If you do, draw that many cards. Good way to filter cards, so chapters 1 and 2 already amazing. Chapter 3, we exile the saga, return it to the battlefield transformed. And I've always known that Kikijiki has had a face only a mother could love, but this further exemplifies that. So the reflection of Kikijiki is the creature that turns into a 2/2 Goblin Shaman. That it's 1 tap, create a token that's a copy of another non-legendary creature you control, except that has haste. So it flips over into a slightly worse Kikijiki. With the right cards in play, you can still go infinite with this. But this is what brings me to my beef with the creature sagas. The vast majority of them, there are a few that do, but the vast majority of them do not have haste. And the idea of waiting 2 turns to flip this thing over, only to get a creature that's sick. We could have done better. There has been examples of better. Going back to Time Spiral for a second, they have the Suspend mechanic where if you cast a creature spell through Suspend, yes, you have to wait your 3-4 turns, whatever it may be. But once you remove that last the Suspend counter, and officially cast that spell, it hits the battlefield with haste, a specific feature of Suspend. So the fact that these enchantments do not have haste is a little harder for me to forgive than it should be. Still, Reflection of Kikijiki gives us it's a really good card, and the first 2 chapters are actually very strong with it, so that's why I decided to highlight this one. Next saga I want to highlight, Hitsuko Consumes All. So this one, it's multicolor, of course, red, black, and 1. Chapter 1 says destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. Say goodbye to things like, I don't know, Viscera Seer, treasure tokens, clue tokens, blood tokens, vampire tokens. Wipes out most token creatures as long as they weren't like a copy of something with a higher mana value. Cleans out things like Llanowar Elves. So yeah, that one is just, depending on the board state, it could just knock out 1 or 2 things, or it could just clean up the board. Chapter 2, Exile All Graveyards. Sure thing, let's eat up all those graveyards. And then Chapter 3, Vessel of the All-Consuming. A 3/3 trample. Whenever this deals damage, it gets +1/+1 counter. And whenever this deals damage to a player, if it has dealt 10 or more damage to that player this turn, they lose the game. So to make this work, it's going to take a bit of manipulation. If you happen to have the right pieces of equipment, you could one-shot someone with it the turn flips over. But you need to be able to grant it haste. Again, there's that problem. and you need to grant it 6 to 7 power. Even funnier is if you do manage to get this up to 10 power and then Chandra's Ignition. That could be a thing too. Inventive Iteration. 4 mana for this particular saga, blue and 3. Chapter 1, return up to 1 creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. You can return one of yours, or you can slow down one of your opponents depending on what's out there. Chapter 2, return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. If you cannot, draw a card. So chapters 1 and 2 are like, eh. Chapter 3, Living Breakthrough. It's a 3/3 creature with flying. No haste, but that's not such a problem here. Whenever you cast a spell, your opponents cannot cast spells with the same mana value as that spell until your next turn. So you flip this over. You cast your Opt. Your opponents cannot cast 1-drops. You cast Thirst for Knowledge, a reprint in this set. That's a 3 mana spell. Your opponents cannot cast 3 mana spells. So I think that ability is just so cool. The first 2 chapters are kind of in comparison, but chapter 3 and the ability that Living Breakthrough gives you is sweet. Jugen defends the temple. A throwback to one of the stories from the old Kamigawa. Blue and 2 for the saga. Chapter 1, you get a 1/1 human monk creature that can tap for a green mana. A little expensive for a mana dork. Let's keep going. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. If no one's wiped up your board yet, the buff's nice. Again, underwhelming chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 3, we get Remnant of the Rising Star. 2/2 flying, no haste again. However, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay X. When you do, put X 1/1 counters on that creature. How's that sound? All of a sudden, you cast your Line of War Elves, you've got like 5 extra mana lying around. You have yourself a 6/6. Also, as long as you control 5 or more modified creatures, modified of course being creatures that are equipped, enchanted with an aura, or have any sort of counter on them, such as +1/+1 counters, they're considered modified. If this counts 5 more of those, this gets +5/+5 and trample. So again, I like that. I like the ability that this grants you. Kumano faces Kakazan. 1 red for this one, so that's actually a really efficient price for this. Let's see what it gives us. Chapter 1, deal 1 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control. Opponents and planeswalkers take away some loyalty? Sure. Chapter 2, when you cast your next creature spell this turn, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. Okay, I like that. Make your next creature a little bigger. Sweet. Chapter 3, Etching of Kumano. This does have haste. It's only a 2/2. This stuff does have haste, and this can come out turn 1, so the timing is pretty decent. If a creature dealt damage this turn by a source you controlled would die, exile it instead. Now, I'm a little confused by the wording here. I don't know if it's the turn that this flips over, because if is usually a word for the replacement effect, but then this turn implies that it's a trigger. So double check your rulings on this card to confirm how this works. I don't know if it's only the turn that this flips over, or if it's every turn that this is out. Regardless, for 1 mana, we're actually getting quite a bit here, and I do like that. Moving on, Ishiko's Reign of Truth. Probably one of the best sagas, actually, in my opinion. It's an uncommon. White and 1. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 both have the same ability. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each artifact or enchantment you control. So if you have a chance to swing and get through, you drop this, buff them up, and go. Chapter 2 isn't quite as strong because people can see that coming. Chapter 3 gives us a pretty strong creature in Portrait of Ishiko. It gets +1/+1 for each artifact and/or enchantment you control. Again, no haste, but if you're running your boots, I guess we can give it haste that way. That's the only thing that holds us back, is the lack of haste. But otherwise, like being able to just have a bunch of artifacts or enchantments on the battlefield and go boom, I like it. One of the best enchantments, I think, from the set. Roaring Earth. Green and 1, and it's uncommon. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or vehicle you control. Yes, landfall, +1/+1 counter on anything. Yes. Of course, later in the game, that might not be so relevant, so we have this nice little channel. Green, green, and X. Discard this. Put X +1/+1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a green spirit with haste. So, early game, slam that down, start and make your creatures bigger as you play your lands. Late game, turn one of your lands to a big creature and go sideways. Fantastic either way. The Kami War. Obviously, this is a fantastic card. I don't need to explain this, but we'll do it anyways because that's what we're here for. Wooburg and 1, so 6 mana in total for this saga. Chapter 1, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls. Yes, please. Chapter 2, return up to 1 other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Then each opponent discards a card. You can actually bring one of your permanents back and get more value from it if it's got a cool ETB. Or you can bounce something that an opponent controls and maybe they'll discard it, maybe they drop something else, who knows. Chapter 3, Okagachi Made Manifest. It's a creature, it's a Wooburg creature, it's considered a creature of all colors, flying and trample. And whenever this attacks, defending player chooses a non-land card in your graveyard. That card comes back to your hand, and this gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the mana value of that card. Again, no haste. That's the only thing holding it back is the no haste, because it's 6 mana and 2 turns later. So if you're going to run this card, make sure you have an enabler ready to go. The Long Reach of Night. I love the art on this. You can see the old, what's it called? The old Honden of, not the Honden of Night's Reach, but the Myosin of Night's Reach in the art. Chapter 1 and 2, each opponent sacrifices a creature unless they discard a card. So we are giving the opponents the choice. Obviously it goes right into Turgid decks if you're the jerk that plays Turgid. There might be other decks where you can take full advantage of this. Chapter 3, this comes back in as Animus of Night's Reach. A 0/4 with Menace. Whenever it attacks, it gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in the defending player's graveyard. Well, I mean, it's a good price. You're stripping your opponents of 6 cards, either from their hand or from the battlefield, or some combination thereof. So I do like that card for this for that reason. Lastly, Tribute to Hirobi. I think this is a funny one. Just watch people panic for this 2 mana saga. Chapters 1 and 2. Each opponent creates a 1/1 Black Rat Rogue creature token. Massacre Girl says hello, by the way. And Chapter 3 is exile this saga. And we get the Echo of Death's Wail. This is a 3/3. This does have haste, flying and haste. And when this enters the battlefield, gain control of all rat tokens. So if our opponents still happen to have a rat or 2 lying around, we can take them. And whenever this attacks, we get to sacrifice another creature to draw a card. And another reason I would like this for Massacre Girl is if Massacre Girl comes out before this flips over, which it totally can, then I can use this to sacrifice Massacre Girl, put her back in my command zone, and have her ready for the next board wipe. Obviously, there's all sorts of applications for this, so be sure to experiment and have some fun. Instants, talking about 3 of them. 2 of them are from the March cycle. Now these are cool. Red X, you can pay any amount of mana you want into X, but you can also exile cards of the appropriate color from your hand to reduce the value of X by 2. So for example, you exile 2 red cards from your hand, X is 4, and that's before you even put any mana into it. So March of Reckless Joy in this case, exile the top X cards of your library. You may play up to 2 of those cards until the end of your next turn. So if the cards in your hand aren't working for you, you can exile them into the X, have basically a fresh script to play with next turn. This is an instant too, so you can do this whenever you need to. March of the Swirling Mist is the other one we're going to look at, and this is amazing. Blue and X. Again, it's an instant. And again, you can pitch blue cards to reduce the cost of the spell by 2. Up to X target creatures phase out. Somebody board swipe you, you can use the March to protect your board. Somebody coming at you for an Alpha Strike, exile their attackers. Well, not exile, but phase them out. They're off the table, you don't have to worry about them. This card can be used, it's a very defensive card, but a very effective defensive card. So watch for this one to mess up with combat decks in the future. And it's a bit of a mean card, but yes, you are already dead. Destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn, draw a card. It's a meme card, but 1 black. Say one of your opponents attacks the other. They block and one of the creatures survives. 1 black takes it off the field and draws you a card. It's pretty good. It's very memey. So we will probably see this one a whole bunch. Over to lands, and this is the big daddy of the lands, of course, Boseiju, Who Endures. I remember actually on a Facebook group that I'm on, somebody said it's not that good because you're giving your opponent a land. Yes, but what would you prefer? That they have a land, or that they have an Astronaut's Altar? Or a Winter Orb? Or an Altar of Dementia? I'd rather they have the land, and being an activated ability means it's very difficult to defend against when it's used. If it's too early in the game to use it, drop it as a regular land. We do still run some of the bounce lands, the Kamigawa bounce lands. Some of the more hyper-focused, hyper-powered decks don't. But on casual tables, you'll still see, say Gruul Guildgate, which will let you bring this right back into your hand. Not Gruul Guildgate, but Gruul Turf. There are ways to easily bring this back to your hand and use it. And this does not, even if you play it as a normal land, does not come into play tapped. So there's literally no opportunity cost to run it in your deck. That's true of all 5 of these. All 5 of them are quite good, but Boseiju stands tall above the rest, both figuratively and literally. I didn't read the ability actually, so the channel of course is green 1. Discard this from your hand to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search their library for a land with a basic land type, put it out to the battlefield, then shuffle. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. Oh, and here's a sneaky trick, by the way. Remember in Modern Horizons 2, they gave you those indestructible artifact lands? Yeah, if you happen to have one of those handy, you can actually target your own. Oh no, it's opponent. Never mind. It's opponent. So you can't use it to ramp out your own lands. I was jumping the gun there for a second. It's still really good though. And this is going to be a money card for our format. A bit cheaper to purchase will be Mech Hanger. Although with Brothers War coming and promising more mechs, I'm assuming we're going to see a lot more vehicles. So with that in mind, this comes into play untapped. Taps for a colorless mana, or you could tap it for a mana of any color to cast a pilot or a vehicle spell. And I feel like this is going to be an overarching theme over the next few sets, so keep that in mind. Also, 3 tap and target vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. No creatures, but you got vehicles? No problem. Mech Hanger's got you covered. The Roadside Reliquary. There's a whole bunch of cards in this set that reward you for running both artifacts and enchantments. Here's a land that does the same. You can tap for a colorless or a 2 tap and sack. Draw a card if you control an artifact. Draw a card if you control an enchantment. You don't need to have both to benefit from this card. But if you do, chef's kiss. And a card that I've kind of hyped up with the Discord group early on is Secluded Courtyard. This is our new tribal staple, by the way. If you're running 2 or more colors and your deck is tribal, you want this. I say 2 or more, 2 or 3. Once you get to 4 or 5, the colorless may be a little awkward depending on what you're trying to cast. But as long as you are casting a creature of the creature type you've chosen, it taps for a mana of any color. So throw this in your ninja deck. You can use it to cast your ninjas. Actually, let's reread that for a second. Add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, or activate an ability of a creature or creature card of the chosen type. You can use this to pay colored mana cost of Ninjutsu. Yes, you can. So there you go. Every tribal deck that's running 2 or more colors is going to want this. Planeswalker, going to talk about 2 of the Planeswalkers. The ones that I chose, of course, are Tesseret, Betrayer of Flesh. Double blue and 2 for this 4 loyalty Tesseret. The first activated ability of an artifact you activate costs 2 less. Be careful with this. Don't tap your mana rock, because that is an activated ability. Do not tap your mana rock before you activate the artifact that you want to activate. Just saying. Other than that, +1, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact. Chances are you're already playing in a deck that can easily recur them. -2, target artifact becomes an artifact creature. If it isn't a vehicle, it has base power and toughness 4/4. A perfect fit for the upcoming Azorius Vehicles Commander deck. And -6, you get an emblem whiff whenever an artifact you control becomes tapped and draw a card. Tap your Sapphire Medallion for a mana, draw a card. Tap your Command Tower for a mana, draw a card. How does that sound? I think that's amazing. Do not, if someone drops this, do not let that player get to 6 loyalty. Like, don't let it happen, or you're gonna get stomped. The other card, of course, we're going to talk about here for Planeswalker, the Wandering Emperor. White, and 2 for this 3 loyalty legendary Planeswalker. The Wanderer, of course, has a name but does not give it, and has not given her name since a very young age. Has Flash, so that's really cool. And as long as the Wandering Emperor entered the battlefield this turn, you may activate her loyalty abilities anytime you could cast an instant. So the turn she comes into play, let's say the opponent attacks you, flash this in, you can use one of the loyalty abilities right off the hop. And the loyalty abilities, of course, 1, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature, it gains first strike. Hey, all of a sudden, your opponent thinks they're going to win combat, you can use the +1 and, well, change the results of that. Or -1, create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. Or -2, exile target tapped creature, you gain 2 life. So if the creature your opponent is swinging at you is huge, exile it, gain 2 life. Turn comes back to you, and you can start plussing. So I think this is actually a really, really good Planeswalker for our format, because she'll wreck an opponent that tries to swing at you, straight up. On to sorceries. The French name, Encre à la Réalité. Anchor to Reality is the English name of the card. Blue, and 2. It is a sorcery. And just reading the English text, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or a creature. Search your library for an equipment or a vehicle card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. If it has mana value less than the sacrifice permanent's mana value, scry 2. This can go get your Sword of the Meek. If you play Sword of the Meek combo, this can go get it. And there's at least one other piece of equipment that can go infinite if you have the right cards in play. So this lets you go get your combo equipment, or you can simply go get your Skull Clamp with it. Either way, this is going to find some really, really nice cards for you. And it's an uncommon, so this will be easy to scoop up. Brilliant Restoration. Great little sorcery. 4 white and 3. Return all artifact and enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Yes, it's a little bit late game, and it's really, really intense on the white, but that's fine. Because if you're running this card, it's because you're running a ton of artifacts and enchantments, and if somebody wipes your board, well, you're getting it all back. Invoke Justice. Actually, all of the Invoke cards are quite good. All 5 Invoke cards have the same mana cost of quad color and 1. As a sorcery, return target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Any permanent artifact, enchantment, planeswalker, creature. Then distribute 4+1/+1 counters amongst any number of creatures or vehicles target player controls. You can use this politically too. So you can buff your creatures or you can buff your opponent's creatures if you feel the need to do so. So I thought this was a really, really cool card. All 5 of them are actually quite effective, but I didn't have room for all 5 in the video. Soul Transfer. Translation Dame. Black, and 1 for this sorcery. Reading the English text, choose one. If you control an artifact and an enchantment as you cast a spell, you may choose both. Exile target creature or planeswalker is the first mode. The second one, return target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. So for 2, I mean, yes, it's sorcery speed. It's not how we want to play our removal necessarily. But the fact that this exiles your opponent's target, absolutely. The fact that you could get something back from your graveyard, also very good. And the fact that it's pretty easy in our format to get both modes is what attracted me to this card. That's all of the 99 cards I wanted to talk about. So let's go on to our next section. We're going to talk about 10 legendary creatures that I think would make great commanders. Let us start with Goshintai of Ancient Ways. Now you would think, why do you want to run this as a commander? There's only 3 shrines in any given color. Well, here's my logic. Red and 2 for this 2/2 with first strike. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1. When you do, deal X damage to target creature or planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines you control. The concept here is that we're going to give it Death Touch. First strike and Death Touch. It swings. Somebody blocks it. Well, their creature dies. Beginning of our end step, we pay the 1. Shoot a creature. Guess what? It dies. So that's sort of the whole concept of the deck is around the fact that this is going to eat our opponent's creatures for breakfast. I thought it was a fun concept, and I'm probably going to do the deck tech on this one, so keep an eye out for it. Hitsuko, Devouring Chaos. This is going to be a popular one. Black and 3 for this 4/4 Ogre Demon. 1 black, sack a creature, scry 2. Or you can pay a red and 2 and tap. Exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. When you exile a non-land card this way, deal damage equal to the exiled card's mana value to any target. The only thing, I think the timing is when you exile an online card, so you get to see what you exile before you choose your target. I'm pretty certain. Double check the rulings on that one. But that's how I read it. And if that's true, that is amazing. Of course, the cards you're going to want on top, you're going to want your Blasphemous Act on the top and exile it. And just, boom, dome somebody for 9. And of course, pay your red and wipe the board. You can do all sorts of cool things with this, I would think. Hinata, Dawn Crowned. This is going to be nasty. Jeskai colors, white, red, blue, and 1 for this 4/4 Kieran Spirit with Flying and Trample. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each target. Spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast for each target. So somebody wants to target you or any of your stuff, or well, anything in general. Even if they target their own things to say give it a buff of some sort, they have to pay 1 more. So a little stacksy in that sense. Spells you cast costing less if it targets something. Well, negate targets a spell. That's going to cost 1 less. There was a big one that's red X, and it has multi-kicker. And so for each thing you target, it's going to cost 1 less to cast that. which means you can blast everything that you want to blast and pay X-1 to deal all that damage. The name of the card is escaping me, and that is sort of embarrassing me, but the point stands. It's really, really good. Even Baral's Expertise was a card that was being talked about. Blue, and 3. And it's return up to 3 target permanents to its owner's hand. Hey, if you're targeting 3 different things, then all of a sudden it costs blue to do that, and then cast another spell, mana value 4 or less. So all sorts of cool things we can do with that. So watch out for this card. People are going to have fun with it. You can throw some auras on it. Those auras target it, so it's going to cost. Those are going to cost less to cast as well. This is exciting. It's a fun creature, and we're going to see some crazy stuff happen with this. Watch out. Speaking of crazy stuff, this is definitely a deck I'm building for the channel. Don't know if I'll build it in paper or not because it's going to be mean. Black, and 3 for Junji, the Midnight Sky. A 5/5 Dragon Spirit, and all the Dragon Spirits are cool, but as a commander, this is the one that screams nasty to me. It's got Flying and Menace, very, very difficult to block. And if ever it dies, each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life, or you can put a non-dragon creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You would then lose 2 life, but that's a very small price to pay. Like I said, I've got something cooking for this one. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate me for it. Kodama of the West Tree. Good to see the last point of the compass covered here. Green and 2 for this 3/3 Kodama Spirit. Has reach. Modified creatures you control have trample. Always good to give stuff trample, especially when they have, say, death touch counters. And whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield. So yeah, just drop this. If your creature's got a +1/+1 counter, ramp. This may very well find a home in one of my decks. I'm thinking, of course, Tennessee. Light Pause, Emperor's Voice. For mono white fans, this is going to be good. 2 mana for this 2/2 Fox Advisor, and whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you had cast it, you can search your library for another aura card with mana value less than or equal to it. Put it onto the battlefield attached to Light Pause, then shuffle. So you can go mono white Aura Voltron with this being your target for both things. You can go a little wider, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. That's an option too. Either way, it's cast an aura, get an aura. Every time. That is great. So watch Light Pause to do some work. Go fetch your all that glitters. All of a sudden you've got 10 enchantments on the board, swinging in for 12 at least. Oh wait, it's got Battle Mastery on it, swinging in for 12 double strike, commander damage. Have fun. Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion. Rat Ninja, black, and 1. So it's 3 to cast or 4 to ninjutsu, black and 3. Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library, so not just the person you hit, but everybody's library. And until the end of the turn, you can play one of those spells. If you do, you pay life equal to its mana value rather than its mana cost. So you can play one of those cards, which means you can actually play a land if you need a land. But if you cast a spell, you're paying life instead of mana, which is sweet. And it's everybody's top card, so you're looking at 2, 3, 4 cards depending on what stage of the game you're at or the size of your table. Sweet. Of course, everybody's going to build Satoru Umezawa. Be careful, because this thing can give some real big, real annihilating Eldrazi ninjutsu. So if you see Satoru and someone's coming in and he's swinging in at you, you better be able to block or be able to remove the creature, because you're going to get got hard. Tamishi, Reality Architect. This is a cool Azorius commander. This is a new direction for them, actually. blue and 2 for this 2/3 Moonfolk Wizard. Whenever one or more non-creature permanents are returned to your hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. And white and X, return a land you control to its owner's hand to return an artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can only do this at sorcery speed, but that's fine, as long as you're playing things to, keep your lands on the battlefield and play more lands. Or even a bunch of mana rocks. Just play a bunch of mana rocks so you don't have to worry too much about the lands. And then you just always have that recursion available to you. Really, really sweet. The reality chip. I actually wasn't super excited until some of the CDH players on our Discord group pointed out a very obvious combo. So let's see what the card itself does, and then we'll talk about the combo. So blue 1 for this 0/4 Equipment Jellyfish. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. As long as the chip is attached to a creature, you can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Has reconfigure, so of course blue and 2, and that's how you attach it to a creature. So the idea with this is that you want to equip it to any sort of creature, even so much as an Ornithopter. And you've got your Sensei's Divining Top, and you're running, say, Ethereum Sculptor, which reduces the cost of artifact spells by 1. Guess what? You've just drawn your whole deck. And as long as you've got the mana for your Thassa's Oracle after that, you're good to go. So if you see that, if you know someone's got this and they're running top, well, take them out and take them out fast. This is going to be, it's already been busted open by the CDH player, so be careful if you see this at your table. Moving on to the Commander exclusive cards, I've got a few to show off. Let's start with Yoshimaru Ever Faithful. 1 white for this 1/1 legendary dog. It has partner. It's the only partner that's been revealed from this set. Probably the only one that's coming out. And whenever another legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, this gets a +1/+1 counter. It's cute, but it's interesting to have just like a single random partner showing up in the occasional booster pack. That's certainly a different way of looking at things. Goshen Tai of Life's Origin. This is going to be a huge hit. It's a legendary enchantment creature, Shrine. So just a reminder, these things, Shrine is not a creature type, it is an enchantment type. So it actually does not have a creature type. It's just a typeless creature that happens to be an enchantment shrine. It's a 3/4, good toughness. When this enters the battlefield or another non-token shrine enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 1/1 colorless shrine enchantment creature token. Which is, enchantment shrine, but again, a typeless creature otherwise. And of course, Wooburg in the activated, so as you can run this as a 5-color commander, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can run this as Shrine Tribal, you can run a ton of sagas in here and just recur those over and over again. It doesn't have to be a Shrine Tribal deck, but why not run them? You may as well. That's kind of where it wants you to go. But if you just want to recur enchantments, cast your Faithless Looting to toss your Omniscience into the graveyard, and then pay Wooburg, bring your Omniscience back from the battlefield, from the graveyard to the battlefield, cast everything else for free, have fun. Your opponents won't be impressed though. They really won't. A couple more legendary creatures we'll talk about. We're going to talk about 2 of the Myosin. We have a new cycle of Myosin, which they all have the 8 mana cost, and oddly enough, all have the same power and toughness as their original Kamigawa equivalents. So there's a fun little fact for you. They all enter the battlefield with an indestructible counter if you've cast from your hand. Not from your graveyard, not from your command zone, from your hand. So, if you're going to be running one of these as a commander, you need to get it into your graveyard or into your hand somehow. There's lots of tools to do that, but it's a lot of work. Or if you just happen to have your command beacon, you can do that too. But nonetheless, they all work the same way. You cast them, they come into play with an indestructible counter if you've cast it from your hand. And they all have a powerful ability if you remove that indestructible counter. In the case of Myosin of Cryptic Dreams, copy target permanent spell you control 3 times. So you've cast the permanent, remove that indestructible counter, boom, 3 more of them. The other one, of course, that I'm highlighting is the Myosin of Towering Might. Green, 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 and 5 for this 8/8 spirit. Has the indestructible counter if you've cast it from your hand. And if you remove an indestructible counter from this, distribute 8 +1/+1 counters from amongst any number of target creatures. It could be itself or something else. Distribute 8 counters as you like at will, and they all gain trample until end of turn. So, yeah, have fun with that. That's... someone's going to go down. You can even put all 8 back onto this thing. If you've managed to cast this from your hand, put all 8 back onto itself. Swinging for at least 16. Doubling season, 24. You see where we're going. But again, I don't recommend running the Myosin as commanders unless you're up for the challenge. But these are all nice and sneaky in the 99. I like this one specifically for Atraxa. Last of these commander exclusive cards is not a legendary creature, but it is a Ruthless Technomancer. And I thought this was a really cool card to highlight. Black and 3 for this 2/4 human wizard. When this enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature you control. If you do, create a number of treasure tokens equal to that creature's power. So, sack a creature, get a bunch of treasures, and then you pay 3, sacrifice X artifacts, which can be those treasures, to return a creature card with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. X cannot be 0. So it's a fun little way of, sack a creature, recur it, get those triggers over and over again. So, this looks like a fun card, and I'm hoping to give this one a shot in some decks. And on that, well, that's all of the cards we were highlighting. So with that in mind, I bid everyone farewell, and we will see you all again when we start doing some deck tags. I've got some brewing to do because we have a lot of awesome cards. Oh, and by the way, I will also do an on-camera box opening of a set, not a set booster box. Oh, yes, it is a set booster box, not a draft, but a set booster box. So we're going to pull some of those fancy lands and have some fun with that. And of course, pull a bunch of really, really cool cards. So with that in mind, I will see you all for the next deck tech. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and have fun with Neon Dynasty. Bye for now.